Yeah, we're live. When I say going live, and
I thought you were
the
searching
image
for the
changes.
button. I'm not watching the stream. What the hell's wrong with you?
Be
You said
different.
going live, like going live. If I can find this button somewhere, it's around here somewhere. Get it? You're listening to PHP Ugly episode 145.
That was very
Wow.
professional. Holy smokes, that freaked me out.
I'm your host, John Congdon. With me, sometimes, actually, as always, Eric Van Johnson
Hey,
and Tom Rideout.
Good evening.
All right, just trying to be silly and kind of threw myself off too.
oh yeah, that was a very very podcast voice there. Like when you said it, I was like, "Where's that coming from?"
Did I leave a tab open?
Something is just not right. We can't have professionalism on this show.
I know it's scary. How's everybody doing? I have been fighting my microphone for so many weeks now. Every time I go to edit or listen to our past show, my microphone always sounds horrible.
For some reason, I feel like you always peg out, like you're hitting.
No, that's 100% what it is. I have a
why?
screenshot. I think you have some kind of post filter that's amping it up a bunch.
Is the gain on the back of your mic just set all the way up?
It's not on the mic because you don't hear it on the normal stream.
It's just
It's
the
only in
recording?
it's only in the recording.
He's not doing anything post as far as audio hijack goes.
Well, I wouldn't know.
What about the settings there on OBS? Not that we should be debugging this live on the show, but
OBS is on a different system.
Oh,
so I'm recording my voice on my desktop.
You just need to talk a little less loudly.
Agreed.
Was that an awkward pause?
It'll get caught in the truncation filter. Don't worry.
Yeah, I was editing the PHP Architect podcast, and yeah, the same thing. It's like every time I'm listening to my mic, I'm like, man, why is my mic so bad? But fortunately, our listeners don't care.
You were asking about our week. What a horrible week this has been for me.
Really?
I woke up Monday. My back was a little sore. Didn't think anything of it because it's not necessarily uncommon. Still went and played Ultimate Monday. By Monday evening, my back was killing me. Tuesday, I walk in the office. I'm just complete pain. Like if I make the wrong move, it's like I feel like I'm gonna fall over. And
he looked like an 80-year-old man walking around the office.
Getting up out of the chair, it was just ridiculous.
And that's why I have all this marijuana on me, officer.
I had no clue what I did. And then my mother-in-law was over at our house Wednesday night.
Those things will kill your back.
She goes, "Oh, thanks again for helping me move that furniture this weekend. It looks really good." My wife standing behind me, she goes, "Maybe that's what it was." I'm like, "Yeah, that's what it was." Moving a sofa couch or sofa bed. Yeah. Which weighed way too much. It just killed my back. And it was just a ton of furniture back and forth. Was not a good week. Still not over it.
But you feeling better?
Yeah, much better.
I had a fantastic week. Well,
yeah, I was going to say I had a great week too.
Yeah, I finally got over Let me rephrase that. I finally pushed through a coding challenge that it's just been eating away at me for the last couple of weeks. Not that it's been a couple of weeks of coding, trying to figure it out. It's just the time I have to actually code, I'm realizing is becoming less and less. And man, when I do get to code, I so enjoy it. And I finally pushed through a really complex permissions workflow that we've been working on with an application for a client. And it's got a lot of moving pieces to it. And this is where I mentioned last week I was diving into the Laravel policies, and I just finally finished nailing everything out. Matter of fact, today I was writing all my tests for it and getting my test to pass. And man, I
Actually,
just
actually, he found that S saved him in some coding too. It was fun sitting there as he ran it and him saying, "The test saved my ass."
yeah, big time. I was actually because I had already because I had uh, started to apply this permission system to the application, which previously didn't have it. I had already anticipated tests failing, but then I started to get tests failing that I had not planned on failing. And yeah, they saved my ass. It actually caught a mistake I had made in the code, and I'm like, holy smokes! I was so happy I had that test and was able to fix it and get everything running. So test to the rescue, that's for sure. And it would probably have been a day or two of trying to figure out how I broke it had it not been for the test. So, yay, test. But yeah, it just felt so good. I so love coding. I really do. I get back into that whole, just put me in a cave with internet connection and a good set of headphones and I'll be happy.
Yeah, I'm in the same place this week. We left off last week. I was working on an application for my GraphQL presentation,
Right.
and and I've been working on that a lot this week. Uh, and I actually have a fully working version of it now, but I got into a lot more stuff than I expected to get into.
Are
You
you
know,
still working with Lighthouse?
yeah. So this web page is GraphQL with Lighthouse, React, Apollo, Tailwinds,
I'm sorry, what's
and
Apollo? I'm not familiar with Apollo.
Apollo is a GraphQL library for React,
Ah,
and it is slick.
interesting.
It supports all the stuff like subscriptions and uh, just the generic query language and all sorts of cool React tech. So you can just have it right there in your JSX and mess with it. It's very handy. But I'm just so impressed
And
with the amount of stuff that's out there.
this is all just a demo app, right? This is nothing you're actually building for work.
Yeah, this is just a demo app, but I kept getting further and further into what I needed that I didn't know. So I got to a point where, I needed to get React compiled in, and I'm like, well, I don't know WebKit. I've never actually dealt with it.
Mm.
So I start getting into Laravel Mix and WebKit, and then I get into Post CSS for Tailwinds, and then I start getting into
Web,
Minification and
you talking about Webpack, right?
I'm sorry, yeah, Webpack, yeah,
Yeah.
and then I start getting into all of these, just all of these technologies that I've heard people using but never used before,
Mm.
and the stuff that I've learned this week is just blows me away. And
So, if I can ask a couple questions, um,
sure,
why did you go down the path of React as opposed to Vue?
I'd used Vue in the past, and I did not like it as
Mm-hmm.
much as React.
Okay.
I've had to tinker with React because a lot of plugins for Chrome and Firefox are written in React.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you try to do plugins in Vue, you can, but you have to do all these caveat compiler issues for it.
Mm-hmm.
React is just natively functions as plugins.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot more React like picking up momentum again. I mean, React in the JavaScript world has always had a lot of momentum behind it, but especially in the Laravel community, Vue kind of took off, and React kind of went back into the shadows a little bit. But I'm hearing more and more of React starting to bubble back up again, and I'm curious as to why that's happening, and what the thought process is behind the people who are going that route. So
Well,
interesting.
for me, it was a numbers game. If you look at the employer interest in frameworks, React beats out Vue by quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for React developers way more than they're looking for Vue developers.
Mm-hmm.
And React seems more concise to me. It seems more natural to me. I couldn't really give you a reason why. I don't have enough experience with Vue,
Mm-hmm.
but React feels like an extension to ES6,
Okay.
whereas Vue felt like a framework on top of it.
Unfortunately, with Laravel, it's pretty easy to bootstrap your project with either one. So
Yeah, you just say switch to React and it switches over.
yeah, how are you liking Tailwind?
Tailwind's really cool.
I
Uh,
know I like it too.
as somebody who doesn't do CSS ever, it just takes all the hassle out of it for me.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be rounded with a drop shadow, so I apply rounded and drop shadow, and that's the
Yeah,
extent of the whole thing.
yeah.
Um, and then I got into tinkering with the @apply method for it, so you can build a class out of classes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really slick. When you combine that with React, it makes things really tight and concise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I started getting into Webpack and how to trim unused CSS from your code with Webpack and
Mm-hmm.
post CSS. So then I've got my full code base down to the absolute minimum minified, packed, and audited CSS bundle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very slick.
And now my big question: Lighthouse. How are you liking GraphQL and Lighthouse?
Lighthouse is great. It's not feature complete. Stuff like subscriptions, I don't believe are fully implemented into Lighthouse yet.
You mentioned subscriptions with the React stuff. I'm not familiar. What is a subscription when it comes to GraphQL? Maybe I haven't gone down that path.
Um, so that would be an open socket waiting for data. So as the
Yeah,
data streams in, you get GraphQL results streamed into you, and
gotcha.
you keep the WebSocket open the whole time.
So,
Gotcha.
so
Okay.
basically, you assign a callback to it. So as the data comes in, you do something with that data.
Yeah, and it's a special data type in uh, GraphQL. It has its own rules and attributes that say, start of message, end of message, and here's more information or less information, stuff like that.
Fascinating.
So, from somebody who has been developing API endpoints for a while, how big of a game changer do you feel GraphQL uh, has the potential of being?
Uh, I mean, in overall, it's a total game changer. It's a different way of thinking of pages and data and components for pages and things like that, because it's a single endpoint. It's just /GraphQL, and everything goes to that single endpoint. So you're not doing any routing through your normal software, your normal routing scripts. All of your query handling is done in these, layered hierarchical queries that you've designed.
Right. That's my big thing is the more I use it and the more I have other team members look at it, the more I find myself questioning when I'm going to, what is my justification for writing endpoints now? Like, why don't I just go this route across the board? And
I could if I had a greenfield application, I could very easily see not having queries in my code.
Endpoints, you mean, right?
No, queries. I could imagine very easily not having the database hit by anything but GraphQL.
Right.
Where
right.
I send out the page structure, and then the client requests the information that they're allowed to access, and all of it is handled through GraphQL.
Yeah.
And
I completely agree with you. Yeah. I'm kind of in that position now. We're pretty far invested in a greenfield application that we've built up a lot of endpoints for, and I'm not comfortable enough with GraphQL to just do an out and out pivot on it. But looking down the road, like my next greenfield app, I'm like GraphQL across the board. I can't come up with a justification not to yet. I'd be curious to find out.
Do they claim to be in a sort of beta state, or is it production ready?
It's used in production by some pretty major companies, including Facebook, of course.
I was going to say, it was created by Facebook, wasn't it? Then we determined that a couple episodes ago.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, I'm glad somebody else is kind of confirming what I'm finding with GraphQL, because I have a tendency to get really excited about tech and not step back and take a real, complete picture of it. And
I'm really curious about the subscription part and the WebSockets. And do you feel that could scale? Are you hitting your web server? And do you have to worry about your connections there?
I have to look into it further. So since I said Lighthouse doesn't support the subscription stuff right now, so I haven't implemented that in any way, and I don't know it as well as I could.
I've looked into WebSockets. I've always been concerned about maintaining the connections through the servers I have control over. So I've gone to something like Firebase to handle that piece for me, where I just let that be the third-party kind of data store that will handle WebSockets.
And that was going to be my other question. Did you do the authentication piece yet? Because that's one of the things I haven't played with yet.
I have not.
Oh.
So I've got all of the practical implementation for a read-only website that publishes blogs, but I don't have a mutator, and I don't have a subscription.
I've done the mutators. The mutators are easy and fun. Yeah.
Yeah. They're a simple concept. They don't require a whole lot. It's compared to RESTful, where you could say get instead of put. You're just supposed to say put. The same is true with GraphQL, is that you could edit data with a query, but you should edit data with a mutator. That's really the difference between the two of them, is which one you should use in a certain environment. So I'll be putting that in at some point. I'm still learning React. So I've got a page that loads up when you say start, and it's very pretty and nice, but nothing is interactive yet. I need to start making functions that call React render methods, and that will make this my first SPA style app.
You're going to become a React developer with Lighthouse. Yeah, that's your entire back end, and then you become a React developer, and you just do the front.
With Lighthouse and then Apollo on GraphQL or Apollo on React, I mean, you treat it just like an attribute of a field where you say, this part here is wrapped in a query tag, and the query tag has the GraphQL string on it, so you just use that, and it's super slick. I mean, the thing works itself when you run it and you look at the code. You just you go, where is it doing something, and it does the whole thing itself. It runs itself. It renders itself. So I'm very React is really fun to play with because you get to make your own tags. So instead of like div and p and a tags, you can make a blog post tag. And the blog post tag has like certain required attributes that you can define in the constructor for it, and it has certain functionalities and states and properties, and you can have that whole thing waterfall down so that your data just flows down the rendering chain.
You can do the same thing in Vue. That's a common approach now.
Yeah, it's so cool to use.
It was funny. One of the cool things about doing the podcast with PHP Architect as opposed to this one is we talk to interesting people. And John and I spoke with one of the contributors to the magazine in an interview today, and he's over in Ireland. And we do a lot of interviews with people who are overseas and over in Europe, and I don't know, it's just really interesting to hear their perspective on PHP and the PHP community where they're at. And he was talking about going to like these hackathons and just the negative remarks that PHP still gets by a lot of the development groups out there in general. Yeah. And I mean, yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but as we've spoken in the past, I mean, some of it's justified. I mean, all right, let's be honest, okay? The language itself seems to question whether or not it's actually a language. You start the whole thing off with a question mark. It's like, I'm going to start coding question mark PHP? Really? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe this is code.
Did you think it through?
But
Good.
Doesn't ASP do the same thing? Or .NET?
I was saying, I don't think there is ASP anymore, is there? And theirs was a percentage sign.
What do I know?
But like we talked about, it's just, and we've talked about it on the show so many times. It's like so many of those arguments are dated and old, and they're arguments about PHP before the tool sets like Composer and frameworks like Laravel, and I don't know, it's just like such an old argument. And then there's the business side of me that I still, to this day, when I hear like super talented developers badmouth PHP, there's a piece of me where I'm like, thank God, I don't want that person to be a PHP developer. They're pretty fucking good at what they do, and I don't need to be in competition with them. So, as long as PHP is running 80% of or 90% or whatever it is of the websites out there, you can hate on PHP as much as you want. Just stay away from it and let me take that business from you.
Well, and I love people who are hating on PHP but love Node, because Node has so much ridiculous crap on it.
Well,
I
and
was
it's just as
trying.
broken as PHP as, in my opinion. I mean, they've had bigger community issues than PHP had. I mean, how many times was Node going away and some other project was spinning up because they didn't like the governing model of Node? And I mean, that happened just like twice that I can think of, where it's like, oh yeah, Node's dead, nobody's developing for Node anymore, we're doing this other thing, and then it gets merged back into Node. Do
See,
you remember that?
Yeah, and I'm just looking at my Node modules directory for my Lighthouse demo app, and it has 17,870 items in the directory for a total of 108.9 megs of data. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is for a demo app. That's a
Well,
lot.
and that's the thing. It's like every time now I run npm install, I get warnings. Hey, 27 of your packages have been identified with vulnerabilities. I'm like,
Yeah.
holy crap, man! I don't even have 27 packages in my package JSON file. It's like how do I have that many vulnerabilities?
And
And
it
then I
takes
have,
so long to install anything too.
yeah.
And it
And
seems fragile as hell. Like I I do an npm install. And it's like if it just redlines, I'm like, well, I'm fucked. Like if my npm install errors out, I delete the node directory and the node modules directory and just try again and just hope for the best. I delete the lock file and just say, let's start from beginning.
I needed to format a date for my sample project, and I went to Stack Overflow because I just wanted like a fancy, March 5th, 2019, whatever string.
Mm.
And the solutions that they had in raw, like vanilla JavaScript, were just atrocious. I mean, like arrays of names for months and days,
Yeah,
and then
I've seen
mapping to
those.
those. Yeah. And I got to one where they're like, yeah, you just npm install moment. And moment is,
That's
Node's
the
version.
carbon of node version of
Right.
yeah.
And I was just like, but why? Why couldn't you just have date underscore format for JavaScript? Why is this? I mean, some of this stuff could be done in the core, couldn't it?
Yep. Yep. What else we got to talk about? Anything?
Like he's been to uh, what is it, UK Laracon Live?
Laravel Live UK is what it's called. Yeah.
I wish the framework were as strong as the community.
Well,
Yeah.
I get into work this morning and there's chatter about an issue, and I don't follow the Laravel community closely. A lot of it comes from this show, talking to you guys, my knowledge of it. Uh, some other people that I know, they hate on Laravel just like a lot of people. Uh, which brings me back to the whole comparing it to people who hate on PHP. Laravel has a place and lots of people use it. But from the things I've been seeing lately and ended up reading this morning, I start to understand. We've complained plenty about semantic versioning and the fact that Laravel doesn't use it. And it just
Yeah.
drives me nuts. There's no reason for something this big used by this many people not to follow semantic versioning and to
Well,
understand it.
and the fact that Composer is built around semantic versioning. Composer is built to understand what is a safe and a not safe update.
Right.
And Laravel,
One of our biggest clients that we've had for years they are so afraid to allow for automatic updates of uh, the minor version, or no, the bug fix version, because of things like Laravel, where you upgrade, which should be a non-breaking change, and it breaks stuff. So anytime any package is updated, they want like a full test suite or to go through the change log with a fine-tooth comb looking for any potential issues. And it's like, you shouldn't have to. If it's uh, the bug, the what is that, the patch version or the third number in the version, if that's increasing, you should be able to just upgrade to that with no issue.
So
Why is Laravel not doing that? I don't get it.
For the listener, if you're sensitive about Laravel's position in the community, you can skip ahead to the end of the show, because it's been a nasty week for Laravel.
Yeah, there's been so much chatter in our company Slack about a couple things that happened in Laravel. I think the big thing, the thing that John's talking about today, was the fact that the third party breaks that basically Laravel was introducing. Laravel had introduced an issue with the upgrade to the environmental file that broke a bunch of third-party libraries, and their justification or their recommendation on fixing it was just, it was driving John up the wall.
Yeah.
The person, I don't even know if I want to use his name or not, but the person responding to the original complaint was basically saying, well, just make sure the package is written for Laravel 5.8. And it's like, what part of third party do you not understand? These packages aren't written for Laravel. They're written to perform a specific task. It's a library I want to use. And
it was stuff like the AWS SDK. It wasn't like stuff that nobody uses.
Well, what's bad is with that example is someone happened to write a wrapper to make the SDK Laravel specific. So there happened to be a fix for that one. But most packages, 99% of packages written that are available via Composer, are not written for Laravel and have no clue about Laravel. So they are going to use get env like everybody else.
Yeah.
So for the maintainer or the person responding to come back and say, well, just make sure the packages are upgraded and written for Laravel 5.8 just isn't the right solution. And when they closed the issue, just saying with that as a response, I about lost it.
Yeah, and Taylor swooped in and reopened the issue, and the discussion went on into the night. So at this point now, there is a resolution being pushed out in the next version of Laravel, which might have already been pushed out. I have an article here about Laravel 5.8.5, but we might be on 5.8.6 tonight. Which
it's funny. I told John when 5.8 came out that I wouldn't even consider upgrading our apps until we can go a week without a patch, and we have not gone a week without a patch yet.
No, 5.8 is totally unstable. After this week, it should be marked as beta. It should Taylor.
That's an aggressive statement.
Not at all.
Okay.
So there's that issue with breaking third-party packages. Another issue that came out is that 5.8 defaults to big increments instead of increments.
Mm-hmm.
And what that caused for some users was a headache trying to figure out why their foreign keys couldn't properly attach when they created a new table. And it's because there was a type mismatch, and because the default schema had changed, it was not a configuration value. It was just it was decided to use big increments instead of increments, and the end. So this wasn't disclosed well enough in the documentation in the upgrade blog, and it's
what was the thinking behind that? When I saw that article come by, at first I thought it was a mistake. I'm like, they must have done something. Why would they have changed it to a bit big?
The person who wrote the complaint blog post about this found the only reference to this in Stack Overflow and in the Git pull request for the issue, where someone had on November 8th suggested using big increments, and on November 9th it was closed and accepted. So in one day, the proposal was made, the change was issued, and then pushed out to 5.8.
Yeah, that's becoming such a familiar pattern too.
So when you say this is the default, do you mean when you create a new migration, it puts big increments into the file and you just have to change it to integer or whatever?
Yeah. Or if you've made a new table and didn't notice that it auto-populates the table with big increments, and you're trying to reference it from an old table, and integer doesn't work anymore, it has to be a big int now. And this is not disclosed in the Laravel documentation.
You just have to notice it when the new migration is created.
Yeah.
Then you
have to know.
You create a second table that references it, and you just say integer, and you don't understand why it's breaking.
Right, which is the situation this guy ran into, is that he always typed integer for his relationships, and it just stopped working.
See, this is furthers my argument of why we should just be using UUIDs across the board now. UUIDs are the way.
So those two 5.8 upgrade issues were this week.
You're saying that like it should be made the default, and you just go break anything else. You should open up a
it should only take
an issue, and it'll get merged within a couple hours, and everyone will be on UUID.
Exactly. Yeah. People be like, wait, what the hell? When did Laravel become UUID default? Goddamn Eric breaking the internet.
So then, and now let's be clear here, is that the same pattern of behavior was how the .env was upgraded to 3.0 instead of 2.0. Was that someone recommended it?
But that was an upgrade to that library across the board. That's not a Laravel upgrade.
No, but the change in the requirement for .env from 2 to 3 was suggested.
That was done in a major release, though. That was 5.7 to 5.8. So
sure, but it was still a 0-day discussion. The discussion lasted less than 24 hours from initial concept to pull request accepted. So even if it was a major release, we're talking about how things get accepted, how the community is involved in the development of the framework, which it fundamentally isn't.
Right, I agree. Yeah, we saw that with the helper files.
The helper files, zero days of discussion. Mm-hmm. Suggested, implemented in less than 24 hours. If you don't see that as a problem, you're the problem. And then the third issue that came up this week, 2 weeks ago, we talked about a Twig vulnerability where Fabien Potentier had issued a full breakdown of the Twig vulnerability, mitigation techniques for people who couldn't upgrade, as well as an upgrade path for people who could, and disclosed everything about it. We got one for Blade this week, or for, I guess, rule checking.
It it was a
validation.
it was the unique rule, and just not, it wasn't a blade
Yeah, I'm sorry.
directive.
It's a validation directive. And Taylor issued a post about this, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. He's actually doing what I didn't think he would do, which was, fully disclosing, addressing, etc. But then as you read down the notification, he basically says this is the fault of people using the validation rule outside of the recommended or documented methods. You're not supposed to allow user input on this field right here. And the fact that you're doing that means that this is on you, and we will be considering patching this at a later date.
And I think they did, right? Didn't they?
He did. Hours after the blog post where he said he would consider fixing it, he did fix it and pushed out a fix for it. But I'm wondering if my LTS installation has this vulnerability, because LTS is never discussed in this bug. I don't know if this is a problem with the LTS version. I don't know if the LTS version got updated. In fact, I know that the LTS version hasn't been touched in a long time. It feels like the LTS version of Laravel is abandoned, and that we even saw that when Taylor was saying, I don't know what's the current version, so I guess LTS is 5.9. Like, he didn't know his own LTS schedule when he was talking at Laracon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just another fucking miscommunication, no conversation, no transparency.
We should be clear about something. It's like our frustrations around these situations with Laravel come from developers who are using it in the real world for real business needs. And it's, these are I'm losing sleep over the fact that Taylor is just on a whim changing things from release to release, with that there is no due process or discussion or even just, a board just to bounce things off of what's coming down the road. And this whole I'm going to keep things secret until the last minute to do this big reveal bullshit, that's got to stop, man. You've got to put these discussion points out to the public so that we can have some visibility to it. We can have some conversation around it. I mean, let this be a community, framework. You can still be the man in charge. You can still have the final say of what does and doesn't go. But you sit there and you have these hobbyist developers who pound their fists on a table talking about how Laravel's ready for the enterprise, and these are exact reasons why it's not. It's so frustrating.
And these are the three issues. These are the three big issues for this week that have made the headlines. The issues that haven't made the headlines, the 5.8.5 patch that was released earlier this week, fixed the get namespace method, fixed store of previous URL, fixed insert or update with empty values, fixed seeding logic in array shuffle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, shit, that is a lot for this week's third patch. That is a lot. And this patch also included a change to how 403 and 503 errors are handled. So if you did an upgrade from 584 to 585 and weren't accounting for that change, guess what? Your exceptions are different now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah. Just drives me nuts. And this is 5.8.5, which is the 5th patch, or maybe even the 6th patch.
Not patches. We can't
in 2 weeks.
With the way the versioning is being done.
And
Well,
that was brought up in the.
Why do you say that, John?
Because it doesn't really mean it's a patch. I mean, new features and new changes seem to be going in.
I gotcha. Okay.
And that got brought up too in the breaking third party bug. If you follow the conversation, at some point, several people start saying, Semver could have handled this. Semver could have stopped this from affecting me.
They also, an official reply was, as everyone knows, Laravel does not follow Semver. And it's like, but you know about it. You know it's a thing. Why not follow it? What's the reasoning behind not following a standard that's out there?
Can we make 6.0 the Semver version? Like when Laravel 6 comes out, let's start using Semver. Maybe I'll fork it. Maybe I'll fork Laravel into just one that's the only difference is that it's properly versioned. Start making my own tags for it. Just mirror the whole thing, but properly fucking version the thing.
Well, that's the problem is you're going to quickly fall out of line with them because they make so many breaking changes that you're going to be 6.1, 6.12 before they're at 6.1.
I'm fine with that.
But then, yeah,
you're silly.
It'll just become a nightmare to take all of their changes and figure out where you need to patch them.
I was wrong. I thought we were at 5.8.6 today.
Mm-hmm.
We're at 5.8.7.
Really?
So 5, 6, and 7 have released over the last 24 hours. I mean, how not to start a whole nother thing, but how can you call this enterprise?
Yeah.
How?
Because they're on the ball with the fixes.
All
right, let's move away from Laravel. We've been talking about this too long.
Hey, Thomas, we had breakfast with a listener this week.
You had breakfast with a listener?
Yeah.
Your wife does not count.
No. This is a listener who was in town for a conference. Actually, in town with his wife. His wife was at a conference, and
yeah.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was gonna say that his wife was in town for the conference. He came with her, and we met up. Went to breakfast yesterday morning, or whenever it was. Tuesday morning.
Yeah, Tuesday morning. Yeah, it's good. It's his second time he's made his way out to San Diego, so it's always good to sit down and talk with him. But yeah, it was fun. Enjoyed it. And John, I think you were going somewhere before I interrupted you. I apologize. I was trying to put an upbeat topic there.
Yeah. So we've been talking lately about me getting one of our oldest clients up to PHP 7, and keep making that march further and further along on it. And I had a hell of a week. Some of their servers, they've decided instead of completely moving them out of the data center over to AWS, since the data center is already paid for, they wanted to keep it in place. So I was tasked with upgrading PHP kind of in place on the servers. Not a good idea. Not fun.
Oh, don't say that.
Not fun. It would be. I pulled one server out of the cluster, upgraded it, put it back in, and then thought through. Okay, what am I missing? Oh crap! I got this configuration value. It wasn't saved or whatever. Just lots of issues there. Thought through that, pulled the second server out, thought I had it well documented, missed a few things. So we were back and forth from 5, 6, 7 throughout this process. Then last night, I think it was, I upgraded they have a separate server for running crons and their workers. And what a pain. I don't know what the difference is. They're running CentOS, and I upgraded to 7.3. And for some reason, the configuration running PHP from a CLI is in a completely different spot than running in the web browser, or the web server, excuse me. And it's like, I got everything working as it was on the two web servers I'd already done, but the workers were still failing, or different issues here and there. And it turned out I just had to copy configuration files from one location to another. But what a nightmare. And finding so much, I mean, the code is over 10 years old, and finding so many spots where it's like, how in the hell did this even work in 5.6? Like, we're getting into 7 and finally getting like told about errors, but how did it work prior? So many places where functions are called statically, even though they're not declared static, and then within that method, they're calling $this. It's like, but it's not an object.
Oh God.
That's
You're
it.
calling
John
it
told
stat.
me that one. I'm like, that can't be working. He's like, no, it works. I'm like, no, it doesn't. He's like, dude, it works.
Well, it doesn't fail. So it doesn't do the intended results. Like, the page still renders, it just doesn't do what you think it does.
Remember earlier we were talking about the bad reputation PHP has?
Well, the funny thing is, a couple of the spots I fixed it, the code calling was passing the value in. They were looking for the user ID. So it was being passed in, but then you go to the function declaration and that parameter wasn't listed there. And then within the method, they're saying this user ID, and it's like, but you don't have that object. And
oh yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
yeah, so all you do is add the parameter in there and then use it, and it was fixed.
Yeah. No, I remember when that was implemented, and that was the way you did it. There was a lot of hand waving that said like no getters and setters. You never have to worry about that because you could just dynamically update an object. That's
crazy.
Again, question mark PHP? Really?
now there's conversation
my life
about
choices
getting rid of that.
What's that, Thomas?
In the internals conversations, they're talking about getting rid of the open tags for .php files.
Oh, really?
Well, we don't intermix PHP and HTML anymore like we used to. When it was a template language, we needed that.
It used to be mostly HTML with some PHP.
Yeah.
Right.
So would the idea be that if it has a .php extension, it just gets executed by PHP?
Yeah.
Which makes
interesting.
Sense. I mean, we had to get rid of the closing tag because people put spaces.
Oh my God! Thank God we did too. Yeah. You worked in the 5.3 days, so
the 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I mean, I had days where I got an error before sending headers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the big one.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh my God, where you just had to inspect every single file and find the carriage return.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And it was just the worst. Oh, I just got like this hot flashback. I'm like uncomfortable now.
Yeah,
that would be interesting.
I'm in favor of getting rid of the opening tag. There's no.
But I wonder how. But you would still use it when you do, like, for templating, for like blade templates and stuff. It would still use it, or
Well, Blade templates have an @PHP directive now.
Yeah, but that gets translated, right? I mean, isn't that
Yeah.
what happens? Yeah, it gets
Yeah,
translated.
so in a non.php file, it would be considered an at-will use.
But the problem is, Blade templates, don't they end in .php? Blade.php.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be deprecated in the next version anyways.
They'll talk about it for about 2 hours and just be like, "We'll just end it with .blade. We don't need."
Yeah. See, perfect.
We're
If you
gonna create
submit
a
the
new
pull
extension
request,
.fu.
submit the pull request. We're fine. I uh,
I mean,
I have to say that the conversation around Laravel this week has been very toxic, very very vitriolic in our chat rooms because the patterns are becoming so common that it's a joke.
Well, it's funny because I mentioned we had the listener came out and had breakfast with us. He has a fairly large application he wrote in Cake PHP. It's Cake PHP version 2, and
yeah.
that's one of the things that he wanted to talk to us about. Is he's contemplating, does he want to go to Cake version 3 or does he want to just rewrite it? He feels like he has to rewrite it either way, and he's contemplating whether he wants to go to Cake 3 or Laravel. And it's just it's such a hard conversation to have because the Cake community is in the release cycles of Cake are so much more thought is put into it. So many more people are involved in that process, and you know, yeah, it's hard. He has years of knowledge around Cake and how to develop in Cake, but there's some things that are appealing to him with Laravel that he really wants to start to take advantage of. And
That doesn't sound hard to me. It sounds like Cake is the way to go. If he knows Cake, I I follow the internals conversations now,
Mhm.
and I didn't realize that there was a role of release manager for PHP. Did you know
Yeah,
about this at all?
yeah.
Mhm.
And people, I mean,
It's like it's a nominated position
right.
per
Well,
release.
usually people volunteer for it. It's
Oh,
usually
not
not a
this
lot of
time.
volunteers.
No, this time was straight up someone nominated somebody else, and he said, "I'm honored, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd be glad to do it." And but he's the guy who's in charge of the next release and making sure that everything is all together and everything merges in correctly and that all the conflicts are resolved and features are properly documented. It's like a full big ass job that is like an honorary job for an open source developer. Like you get to be this guy because you're a big name.
Person.
But
You
that
get this person. Correct yourself. Damn it.
person, sorry, I
Developer.
misgendered.
You get to be this developer.
So I look at that and I'm like, that is such a cool thing to do. That is such a cool way for a community to operate. What the fuck is going on in Laravel land? Like threads are
This-
getting locked because it's too hostile. Like the reporting of a bug was just too hostile. And and
Back
when
here.
huh?
How do we get back to Laravel again?
Oh, I I'm
It's been a long
incredibly
week.
I'm incredibly frustrated. I think that's just the issue is that I'm so frustrated by this whole thing this week because it's been one thing after the other and it's been shitty responses every single time and then 3 patches in 2 days. It's like thank you for the eye rolling gif. It's
Uh,
we got back to it because I'm frustrated by it, but I will try to hold myself back.
no, I think it was Eric's fault because he brought up Cake versus Laravel, and
It is. Yeah.
He said the L word.
Thanks for throwing me on the bus there, John. Appreciate it.
yep, no problem. That's what I'm here for. I don't contribute much other way, so I'll,
Let's throw up our Patreons. This seems like a good spot to.
That's true.
thank
I need to
everybody.
take 1 minute. So you cover the Patreons and the reward levels.
The reward, yeah, we have no new Patreons to reward, but we do appreciate all the ones that we have out there. So if you're watching the video stream, you should be. If you're not watching the video stream, you should be, because you get to see our lovely faces.
We got to figure out how to release this on it as a video podcast versus just audio.
I mean, how many platforms are there out there that play video though? I guess we could look at it. I mean, it's on YouTube. It's probably something that's fairly simple to do. I just need to look at like the Apple iTunes and figure out what it takes to release a video podcast. I actually just never gave it any thought, to be honest. But I guess since we're putting this extra,
the biggest thing is editing. You know, we edit the audio version,
right?
Yeah, we as in this show.
It's a rough edit though. I mean, it's really just a scrub over the audio quality and the
yeah. Trust me, I've noticed.
Intro and outro.
This is gonna be the most heavily bleeped show we've had in a long time.
It's funny, like when I edit it, I'm hypersensitive to uhs and ands and ohs and heavy breathing, and I'm like moving tracks around, and I copy things here and put it over here just so everything sounds right. And then I listen to I listen to Thomas's edit, and it's just like, hey, don't put this in the podcast, but that fucking guy, man. It's like, nope, that made it in apparently.
Last week, we were all on some kind of downers last week because there were just long pauses. Yeah. There's places where the conversation stalled like a biplane.
It's funny because if you ever really want to work on your speech and how you present yourself, record yourself talking and edit it. It will drive you up the wall. And then other people's speech patterns will drive you up the wall as well. For the PHP podcast, the one we do for PHP Architect, we did something different this month in the sense that we had the editor of PHP Architect on with us. And I can tell you, it goes from, if John and I will normally record about 30 to 40 minutes of just the podcast of him and I talking. And that will typically take me about an hour to edit down. You add a third person, it adds a whole additional hour. It's like that third person is, that third track in the editing process just adds so much for me. For you, I'm sure it doesn't add anything, Thomas. You just blow through it.
Well, no, what I do is I cut John's track out and I just edit your track and my track. And then once that's done, I put his track back in over it. It's like a 2-minute job.
Yeah.
Come on, you gotta admit, I've been better this episode. I hope.
You've been.
We're all a bit perkier.
I'm trying to speak quieter to see if my recording's any better, but yeah.
You've done a good job. At least it seems like it.
All right. You guys ready for some doom and gloom?
Oh, I thought we were wrapping up.
What?
Yeah, doom and gloom is how we wrap the show up.
Wasn't this whole episode doom and gloom?
All we've been talking about is doom and gloom. Holy smokes, man.
Save it for the Patreons.
I've got a week for the Patreons this week. It's going to be It's going to be epic.
All right. All right, lay it on us. What do you got?
Well, it turns out that large construction machinery uses a, let's say, non-existent version of encryption or security. 5 attacks were tested against large construction equipment, including cranes, excavators, and scrapers. I imagine bulldozers. And it turns out that just with a software defined radio, which you can get for $100, you can snoop on the signals, figure out what it is the commands do, and then just repeat them back to the machine, and it'll do them. And in the case of like your car key fob, there is like a level of crappy security behind it so that it can't immediately do a replay attack. But in the case of these kinds of machines that move tons of dirt and steel, even that level of attention wasn't paid to it. It's like having a RC controller accidentally interfere with construction equipment. It's so atrociously bad that with a Chromebook and a USB dongle for software-defined radio, you could demolish a construction site entirely on your own.
That doesn't sound good. Although I would like to have a nice big RC excavator in my backyard.
Oh, did I ever tell you about my buddy that had one of those? I have
let's go. Let's hear it.
It's just the first thing. The guy is absolutely a genius. John knows who I'm talking about, even though if he doesn't know who it is specifically right now.
Lives at the top of the hill.
Yeah, that's the dude. The guy is an absolute genius, and yeah, he was trying to develop a product to allow workers of heavy equipment to work inside the trailer and not have to be in harsh conditions. So like when it's raining or if it's super hot, they can be inside, or ideally they could be somewhere else in the country so that you're hiring the best drivers or the best workers of this equipment, and you're not limited to whoever's in your local area. So this is what he's working on. And so he is a wealthy individual, and he goes and buys one of these big earth movers. And I go over there, and he has the whole thing, all the mechanics and stuff, taken out, and he's hooked in, all these microprocessors and stuff. And it still works. Like he's like, "Hey, you want to get in and drive?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got it." And I drove it around. It's so much.
He's a genius, but he has poor judgment.
You're like a kid, It's like, why wouldn't I want to drive this thing? It was so much fun.
But did you look at and go?
So I come back about
that was a Trump reference, by the way.
Oh, a couple weeks later, and as John mentioned, he lives on top of this very large hill in our town, where there's only 2 homes on top of this hill. And I seen the excavator. I forget what it was, what you actually call it. It's the one with the big shovel in the front. He had it like in this decommissioned state, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" He goes, "Oh yeah, I had a bug in my software." I'm like, "Oh really?" He goes, "Yeah. Fun fact: it should always fail to off." And I'm like, "What?" Yeah. Apparently, so he's controlling the thing with the remote, and it had lost its signal to the remote, so it just kept going. He's like, it was going down the hill. He's like, he's not an athletic individual, and he's like, running down the hill after this thing, trying to catch up. holding out the remote, trying to get it to stop. It was like a drone going to hell, man. It was the funniest thing.
I
He's
was
just
gonna
telling.
say I've done my research on drones, and that's definitely an issue. Is the out of range should default to stop.
Yeah. Well, I think with drones, they don't they actually come back? Like if they go out of range, don't they? The GPS takes them back to where they took off from. I don't
It
know.
depends. It depends on the software. Amazingly enough, all the drone software that you see nowadays is based off of the Wii U or the Wii remote.
What?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. So somebody realized that while reverse engineering the Wii remote, that the gyroscopic calculations that were being done by it were better than anything else that was out there. And so they took the gyroscopic calculations that they were doing for their Wii emulator and ported it over to controlling gyroscopic stabilization on drones.
Get out of here! You're just full of little nuggets of information. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm going with.
It's it's fascinating. The drone stuff is fascinating because it really was a grassroots movement to get quadcopters working, and it happened really, really fast with this open source mentality. So a lot of the drone stuff that you see today is completely built off of open source software.
And to answer your question, Eric, about returning home, it depends on the drone. The higher quality, yes, but they don't all have GPS built into them.
I thought they had to. I thought that was like one of the requirements for them to be able to. I guess it's a matter of how high they go, right? Because if they have to report whether or not they're in commercial airspace and like disable or something. Somebody was telling me.
You're talking about bigger type drones where the little toy drones that you have flying around that can still go out of range.
But they can't go that high. Gotcha.
Well, it also has to do with if it has GPS installed, because if it has GPS, you can designate a destination and you don't even control the drone.
Right. Well, that's what he was saying. He was telling me not all drones have GPS, and I naively enough thought that they all had to have them because of some sort of regulation about going into commercial airspace. They had to kind of report where they were.
No, the software for the stuff like the DJI Mavic, the software does that on the remote end of it, but not necessarily on the drone part of it. But I mean, as you know, there's plenty of issues with drones being flown into airports.
Yep.
Just drones in general. I mean, we see them occasionally outside our house, just flying overhead, and my wife hates it. I'm kind of like, I'm not a huge fan of it, knowing that somebody could be sitting there watching, like our kids in the backyard. But just weird. And then you go to the beach and you see them all the time over the beach. Just
really,
yeah, just creepy.
Weird.
Because you know they're just looking at bikinis.
With that weird note, I think we're done for the week.
The image of John in a bikini. We should probably wrap this up at this point.
If we haven't lost listeners yet, we're going to.
Somebody want to wrap it up?
All right, this has been episode 145 of PHP Ugly. Oh. I'm Tom Rideout.
I'm Eric Van Johnson.
I'm John Congdon. Keep it
ugly. All right.
You bozos.
There's nobody in Discord, so we can cut out early.
Yeah, nobody in there.
So much for Daryl saying, I'm going to listen tonight.
Yeah, Daryl. Where are you at? brother. Over.
And my wife is out.
What's wrong with your wife?
She was supposed to go to the bar and then go visit her friend, and she's not visiting her friend yet.
Bring the music. I'm wondering if I can put the music as background here. What was the music?
Yeah. Just a moment with you. Just a moment.
Wait. If I come over here and I add that, can I add a audio input capture? Was that what it was?
No.
Yeah, it is. Boom. That's all. Boom.
When I wake up, I can't help but to wonder, is this even real?
And that a little background music for the wrap up show. We can't hear it, but hopefully our listeners can.
So Eric, you have some kind of you have some kind of gain on your signal before it gets recorded, like between your mic and Audacity or whatever you're using to record.
Audio hijack.
But there's no gain on it because that's what's coming out to us. The mic goes into audio hijack, out to the loopback audio, and that's what you are sending to Skype, right?
I can stop recording actually. Yeah, exactly. And for just FYI, Thomas, I mean, John and I have gone through the setup a couple times, and mine looks like it's set up exactly like his. And his is so much better. And I mean, like right now he's home, but his audio here at the office is what I edit for the PHP podcast. And I was just doing it today.
Did I send a screenshot of when I was editing?
Well, you don't have to. I see it when I edit.
It's I mean, you're completely peeked out the whole time.
Yeah. And I don't know why.
But you're not like that in the YouTube stream. Like, you're not like that at all in the YouTube stream.
I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I'm doing nothing to the audio. Yeah, it's driving me crazy. And it just started happening. Like, it just started happening about a month or so ago. I want to say when John and I started playing with the gates, but, I mean, that shouldn't be changing anything. And my gate settings are pretty much on par with what John's gate settings are. So, I don't know. I don't know why it's happening.
Huh.
I wonder if there's a...
What about the mixer and OBS?
Again, OBS is on a different machine. OBS is getting
OBS doesn't touch it
through Skype. So this is all being fed through Skype.
Got it.
Yeah, I wonder if there are no like equalizer settings in Mac OS. So I mean, there's nothing like that, right?
Just the input volume.
Mm-hmm.
So, my sister-in-law and her family is visiting this weekend.
We're still streaming, FYI.
Okay.
All right.
And my wife's estranged, long-lost son is visiting this weekend.
Nice.
And at 5:30 today, I got a message from Jose that said, we have an emergency thing to work on. We have to move 1,000 domains over to AWS.
Good God.
And that has to be ready to go on Monday. So what I'm saying is, how would you feel about editing the episode this week?
Oh, sure. I got yard work I got to do, and I got to finish the PHP podcast one. But I'll make time for it.
Pick one of the twinsies and tell her to learn how to do it.
I'll
I can. What's that? Did you volunteer, John?
I'll try it.
You want to try? All right.
It might come out like Friday next week, but I'll try it.
So earlier than normal.
That's not too far off Thomas's schedule.
I got it out on Monday this week. Very proud of
You
myself.
I was impressed.
Eric, throw your file up there. I'll give it a go.
All right. That works.
I don't have all the intros and outros and all that crap, but whatever.
It's in partials. Justin Marr, The Grind.
Yeah.
And then the outro is under shows as PHP Ugly Outro.
If you really get stuck, John, just ping me and I'll.
Ping me because I'll be sitting at my desk working all weekend.
But you don't want to get bothered.
Why not just put the intro there too?
I won't mind. I'll just be running iterative tests to make sure I'm parsing DNS records correctly. It's such a nightmare. It's a whole automated thing, or I have to delete A records and create CNAME records. And it has to be different depending on the server pool that the shit's in. It's such a nightmare.
So are you guys on AWS now?
No, but we will be on Tuesday. Yeah.
I mean, servers and everything, or just DNS?
No DNS, just servers. We're maintaining our current DNS provider.
Oh, wait a minute. You're not talking about migrating the records. You're migrating the servers?
Migrating the servers, but the records have to be updated to point to AWS now.
No, I get that piece, but holy crap, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I said.
That's a I thought you were just migrating the records from whatever DNS thing you're using to AWS.
Nope, I am looping over 1,000 records and updating their pointers.
Wow.
Yep. And it's gonna be rough. I mean, there's no way that this goes well. And that was Jose basically said that. He said, yeah, Monday we might need you to stay on board the entire night. Just because there's no perceivable way this goes correctly. I'm deleting all of these records and then inserting new records to our current host, and it just swings 1,000 domains over to a new. It's just chaos.
Is there a fallback plan? Like, can you go back if worst case happens?
I mean, in this scenario, there isn't. There really, with DNS, there's no safety net.
I mean, in the sense you can put it back. The old servers aren't coming down, right?
They're not, but any work to put them back is going to be just as difficult as pointing them to the right place in the first place.
Why is it such a big all or nothing and not?
Well, I am logging the changes. So before I delete the existing record, I'm logging the change to a file that could theoretically allow us to run a revert. But again, that's not written yet either. I have to write that this weekend. This is going to be a rough one. I'll let you guys know how it goes.
Sounds like fun. All right.
You guys have a good night.
You too, man.
Thank you to all of our Patreons and all of our Discord listeners.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We appreciate it. Good night.